Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that a medical physicist involved in a clinical trial investigating a novel radiation therapy technique has identified a potential, albeit rare, adverse event not previously documented in the protocol. The physicist is concerned that the current informed consent documents do not adequately describe this specific risk, and the protocol's monitoring procedures may not be sensitive enough to detect it early. The physicist is considering how to proceed. Option A. Discreetly adjust the data collection parameters to minimize the likelihood of observing this specific adverse event, thereby avoiding protocol amendments. Option B. Inform the principal investigator of the concern but continue enrolling participants as per the existing protocol, deferring any discussion of amendments until after the trial concludes. Option C. Immediately halt the enrollment of new participants and work with the principal investigator and the Institutional Review Board (IRB) to amend the informed consent form and protocol to address the newly identified risk and enhance monitoring. Option D. Proceed with the trial as planned, assuming the risk is statistically insignificant and unlikely to affect most participants, and address any occurrences if they arise. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt the enrollment of new participants and work with the principal investigator and the Institutional Review Board (IRB) to amend the informed consent form and protocol to address the newly identified risk and enhance monitoring. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to advance scientific knowledge and the imperative to protect human subjects in research. The medical physicist must navigate the ethical landscape of informed consent, potential risks and benefits, and the integrity of research data, all within the framework of established regulatory guidelines for human subjects research. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes patient safety and autonomy while upholding the scientific rigor of the research. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, and respect for persons, as codified in regulations governing human subjects research. Specifically, it ensures that participants are fully informed of the risks and benefits, can freely consent without coercion, and that the research design minimizes harm. Adherence to Institutional Review Board (IRB) protocols and good clinical practice (GCP) guidelines is paramount. An incorrect approach that proceeds with the research without addressing the identified safety concerns fails to uphold the principle of non-maleficence. It risks exposing participants to undue harm and violates the ethical obligation to protect vulnerable individuals. This also constitutes a regulatory failure by disregarding established safety protocols and potentially circumventing IRB oversight. Another incorrect approach that involves altering the data to obscure the safety concerns is a severe ethical and regulatory violation. This undermines the integrity of the research, deceives participants and the scientific community, and constitutes scientific misconduct. It directly contravenes the principles of honesty and transparency in research. A further incorrect approach that involves withdrawing the participant from the study without proper follow-up or communication with the IRB and the participant's primary physician neglects the ethical duty of care. While participant safety is paramount, abrupt withdrawal without a clear plan for continued care or communication can lead to further harm and breaches of trust. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the ethical principles at play, a thorough understanding of relevant regulations, e.g., FDA regulations for clinical trials, institutional policies, consultation with the IRB and other relevant stakeholders, e.g., principal investigator, ethics committee, and a commitment to transparency and participant well-being. The physicist should always err on the side of caution when participant safety is in question and ensure all actions are documented and justifiable. Question 2. Regulatory review indicates that a radiation oncology department is considering the adoption of a novel intensity-modulated radiation therapy (IMiT) beam arrangement technique that has shown promising results in recent peer-reviewed literature for a specific patient population. This technique deviates from the department's current, established IMiT planning and delivery protocol. The medical physicist is tasked with evaluating this proposed change. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately implement the novel beam arrangement for all eligible patients, as the published literature suggests potential benefits. Option B. Proceed with implementing the novel beam arrangement using the existing quality assurance procedures, without further consultation with the radiation oncology team. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive evaluation of the novel beam arrangement, including a review of supporting literature, consultation with the radiation oncology team, development of a robust quality assurance plan, and a formal proposal for protocol amendment if deemed safe and effective. Option D. Reject the novel beam arrangement outright because it is not currently part of the department's approved treatment protocol. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive evaluation of the novel beam arrangement, including a review of supporting literature, consultation with the radiation oncology team, development of a robust quality assurance plan, and a formal proposal for protocol amendment if deemed safe and effective. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the established clinical protocol with a novel technical approach that may offer improved patient outcomes but deviates from current institutional practice. The medical physicist must exercise sound professional judgment, considering patient safety, efficacy, and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based evaluation of the proposed technique. This involves thorough literature review, consultation with relevant stakeholders, physicians, dosimetrists, radiation therapists, and a comprehensive risk assessment. Adherence to established quality assurance, CA procedures, and potential protocol amendments ensures that any new technique is implemented safely and effectively, aligning with regulatory expectations for patient care and technological advancement. This approach upholds the principle of do no harm while striving for optimal treatment. An incorrect approach that immediately implements the new technique without proper validation fails to meet regulatory requirements for QA and patient safety. It bypasses essential steps designed to identify potential errors or adverse effects, thereby exposing patients to undue risk. This constitutes a failure to adhere to established safety protocols and may violate regulations mandating rigorous testing and approval of new treatment modalities. Another incorrect approach, to dismiss the technique solely because it is novel and not part of the current protocol, represents a failure to embrace potentially beneficial advancements. While caution is necessary, outright rejection without objective evaluation can hinder the provision of optimal patient care and may not align with the spirit of continuous improvement expected in medical physics practice. This could be seen as a failure to act in the best interest of patients when a superior, safe alternative is available. A further incorrect approach, to implement the technique without involving the radiation oncology team, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Effective radiation therapy is a multidisciplinary effort. Excluding key team members from the decision-making and implementation process compromises communication, coordination, and ultimately, patient safety. It violates the collaborative nature of patient care and the regulatory expectation for integrated team approaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the proposed change and its potential benefits and risks. 2. Conducting a thorough literature search and consulting with experts. 3. Evaluating the proposed change against existing institutional protocols and regulatory requirements. 4. Developing a comprehensive QA plan for implementation and ongoing monitoring. 5. Engaging in open communication and collaboration with the entire radiation oncology team. 6. Documenting all evaluations, decisions, and implementation steps. Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that a radiation oncologist requests a deviation from the standard protocol for using a specific type of ionization chamber for absolute dose calibration of a new linear accelerator. The oncologist believes a different chamber, not typically used for this specific energy and beam quality, would be more convenient for their workflow. As the medical physicist responsible for quality assurance, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough technical evaluation of the proposed ionization chamber's suitability for the specific beam energy and quality, considering its calibration, energy dependence, and potential for perturbation effects, and document the findings and decision. Option B. Refuse the request outright, citing strict adherence to established protocols without further discussion or investigation. Option C. Proceed with using the requested ionization chamber as a trial without formal evaluation or documentation, assuming it will likely yield comparable results. Option D. Immediately approve the use of the requested ionization chamber to maintain a positive working relationship with the radiation oncologist and accommodate their workflow preference. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough technical evaluation of the proposed ionization chamber's suitability for the specific beam energy and quality, considering its calibration, energy dependence, and potential for perturbation effects, and document the findings and decision. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a medical physicist is faced with a potential conflict between established quality assurance protocols and a clinician's request that deviates from those protocols, specifically concerning the use of an ionization chamber for dose verification. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing patient safety, adherence to regulatory requirements, and maintaining a collaborative relationship with the clinical team. The physicist must exercise sound professional judgment to ensure that any deviation from established procedures is scientifically justified and does not compromise the accuracy or safety of radiation therapy. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes patient safety and regulatory compliance through a systematic and evidence-based decision-making process. It involves a thorough review of the clinical request, an assessment of the potential impact on dose delivery accuracy, consultation with relevant experts or committees if necessary, and clear documentation of the rationale for any decision. This aligns with the fundamental ethical obligations of a medical physicist to uphold the highest standards of care and to ensure the safe and effective use of radiation in medicine, as mandated by regulatory bodies and professional guidelines. An incorrect approach that involves immediately acceding to the clinician's request without proper evaluation fails to uphold the physicist's responsibility to ensure accurate dose delivery and patient safety. This could lead to under- or overdosing, potentially harming the patient. It also represents a failure to adhere to established quality assurance protocols, which are in place to prevent such errors and are often mandated by regulatory frameworks. Another incorrect approach, that of outright refusal without engaging in a discussion or seeking to understand the clinician's rationale, can damage professional relationships and may overlook a legitimate clinical need that could be addressed through a carefully considered and documented exception. While maintaining protocol is important, a rigid stance without exploration can be counterproductive to optimal patient care. Finally, an incorrect approach that involves implementing the deviation without proper documentation or justification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This lack of transparency and accountability makes it impossible to track the decision-making process, learn from potential errors, or demonstrate compliance during audits. It undermines the integrity of the quality assurance program. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Active listening to understand the clinician's request and the underlying clinical rationale. 2. Reviewing the relevant physics principles and established protocols related to the ionization chamber's application. 3. Assessing the potential impact of the proposed deviation on dose accuracy and patient safety. 4. Consulting with senior physicists, the radiation safety officer, or the medical physics quality assurance committee if the deviation is significant or outside established guidelines. 5. Documenting the entire process, including the request, the evaluation, the decision, and the justification. 6. Communicating the decision and its rationale clearly to the requesting clinician. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new automated in vivo dosimetry system for radiation therapy offers potential improvements in real-time monitoring and reduced patient setup time, but requires a significant capital investment and extensive staff retraining. Considering the regulatory framework for quality assurance in radiation therapy, which of the following approaches best represents professional practice? Option A. Implement the new system immediately to leverage its perceived benefits in efficiency and patient monitoring, assuming it will inherently improve QA. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive, evidence-based evaluation of the new system's impact on patient safety, treatment efficacy, and overall QA program effectiveness, including a pilot study and thorough staff training before full-scale adoption. Option C. Reject the new system due to the high initial cost and the need for retraining, opting to continue with the existing, well-established QA procedures. Option D. Integrate the new system into the existing QA workflow gradually, without a formal pilot study, to minimize disruption and allow staff to adapt organically. The correct answer is A. Implement the new system immediately to leverage its perceived benefits in efficiency and patient monitoring, assuming it will inherently improve QA. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical physics where a new, potentially beneficial technology is introduced, but its implementation requires significant resource allocation and raises questions about its impact on existing quality assurance (QA) protocols. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for technological advancement and improved patient care with the practicalities of budget constraints, staff training, and the established efficacy of current QA methods. A critical judgment is required to determine if the proposed technology offers a demonstrable improvement in safety or efficacy that justifies the investment and potential disruption to established QA workflows, all within the framework of regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based evaluation of the new technology's impact on patient safety and treatment efficacy, directly aligning with the core principles of medical physics practice and regulatory expectations. This involves a thorough review of the technology's performance data, its integration into existing QA procedures, and a clear demonstration of how it enhances the overall quality of care. Regulatory frameworks, such as those overseen by the FDA in the U.S., mandate that all medical devices and treatment modalities used in patient care meet stringent safety and efficacy standards. Implementing a new technology without this rigorous assessment would violate these requirements. Furthermore, professional ethical guidelines for medical physicists emphasize patient well-being and the continuous improvement of radiation therapy services. A proactive, data-driven approach ensures that any changes to QA are not merely for the sake of novelty, but contribute to a demonstrably safer and more effective treatment environment, thereby upholding the highest standards of professional practice and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediate adoption of the new technology based solely on its perceived novelty and marketing claims, without a comprehensive evaluation of its impact on existing QA protocols or patient outcomes. This fails to meet regulatory requirements for demonstrating safety and efficacy before widespread implementation. It also represents an ethical lapse by potentially introducing unvalidated changes into patient care without due diligence, risking unintended consequences. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the new technology outright due to budget constraints without a thorough investigation into its potential benefits, and whether it could, in fact, lead to long-term cost savings through improved efficiency or reduced treatment complications. This approach neglects the professional responsibility to explore advancements that could enhance patient care and may violate the principle of striving for the best possible outcomes within available resources. It also fails to engage in the necessary due diligence required by regulatory bodies to justify the continued use of existing, potentially less optimal, technologies. A third incorrect approach is to implement the new technology in a piecemeal fashion, integrating it into QA without a clear understanding of its interaction with all existing QA procedures and without adequate staff training. This creates a fragmented and potentially unsafe QA system, increasing the risk of errors and non-compliance with regulatory standards that expect comprehensive and integrated QA programs. It demonstrates a lack of systematic planning and a failure to uphold the professional obligation to ensure the integrity and robustness of the entire QA framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the introduction of new technologies by first establishing a clear understanding of the current regulatory landscape and the specific requirements for QA in radiation therapy within their jurisdiction. This involves consulting relevant guidelines from bodies like the American Association of Physicists in Medicine (APAM) and regulatory agencies. The decision-making process should then follow a structured, evidence-based pathway. 1. Identify the specific problem or area for improvement that the new technology aims to address. 2. Conduct a thorough literature review and gather performance data on the technology. 3. Perform a risk-benefit analysis considering patient safety, treatment efficacy, and resource implications. 4. Develop a comprehensive implementation plan that includes rigorous testing, validation, and staff training. 5. Ensure that the integration of the new technology enhances, rather than compromises, the existing QA program and remains compliant with all applicable regulations. 6. Document all evaluations, decisions, and implementation steps for future reference and audit purposes. Question 5. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of minor equipment malfunction and a low likelihood of significant patient exposure during the initial use of a new diagnostic imaging modality. The clinical department is eager to begin patient imaging as soon as possible. What is the most appropriate initial action for the medical physicist to take? Option A. Delegate the development of safety protocols and staff training to the lead technologist, focusing the physicist's efforts on verifying the equipment's technical specifications. Option B. Proceed with equipment installation and initial testing, deferring detailed safety protocol development and staff training until after the first week of clinical operation. Option C. Authorize immediate clinical use of the equipment after basic functional checks, assuming the manufacturer's standard operating procedures are sufficient for initial safety. Option D. Halt the installation process and immediately initiate a comprehensive risk assessment, develop detailed safety protocols, and schedule mandatory staff training sessions before any patient imaging commences. The correct answer is B. Proceed with equipment installation and initial testing, deferring detailed safety protocol development and staff training until after the first week of clinical operation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the medical physicist to balance the immediate need for a new imaging modality with the potential long-term implications of inadequate regulatory compliance and safety protocols. The decision-making process must prioritize patient safety and adherence to established standards over expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified risks through a structured, evidence-based process. It aligns with the fundamental principles of medical physics, which include ensuring the safe and effective use of radiation and medical imaging technologies. Specifically, it adheres to the regulatory framework by mandating a thorough risk assessment, development of appropriate safety protocols, and comprehensive staff training before implementation. This proactive approach minimizes the likelihood of adverse events and ensures that the new equipment is integrated into clinical practice in a manner that is both safe and effective, fulfilling the physicist's ethical and professional obligations. An incorrect approach that bypasses a formal risk assessment and safety protocol development would be professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of regulatory requirements that mandate such procedures for new equipment. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for patient safety and the well-being of staff, potentially exposing them to unnecessary risks. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of equipment installation without considering operational safety and training would also be a significant professional failure. While technical proficiency is crucial, it is insufficient without a comprehensive understanding and implementation of safety measures. This oversight neglects the human factors and operational environment, which are critical components of safe medical practice and are often explicitly addressed in regulatory guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of all potential risks and benefits. This includes consulting relevant regulatory documents, engaging with clinical stakeholders, and developing a detailed implementation plan that incorporates safety, training, and quality assurance. A commitment to continuous learning and adherence to established ethical codes are paramount in ensuring that patient care is always prioritized. Question 6. Governance review demonstrates that a new, advanced imaging modality has been acquired by the hospital, but its integration into clinical workflows and routine quality assurance protocols has not yet been fully established. The medical physicist is tasked with overseeing its safe and effective implementation. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and professionally responsible approach for the medical physicist? Option A. Immediately initiate a comprehensive validation process, including phantom studies, calibration checks, and the development of specific quality assurance procedures tailored to the new modality before allowing its routine clinical use. Option B. Rely solely on the manufacturer's provided technical specifications and initial training materials to guide the implementation and ongoing quality control of the new modality. Option C. Expedite the deployment of the new modality to meet clinical demand and potential revenue generation, deferring detailed quality assurance procedures until after initial patient imaging has commenced. Option D. Delegate the primary responsibility for validating the new modality's performance and establishing quality assurance protocols to the clinical imaging technologists, with minimal physicist oversight. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a comprehensive validation process, including phantom studies, calibration checks, and the development of specific quality assurance procedures tailored to the new modality, before allowing its routine clinical use. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from a potential disconnect between established quality assurance protocols and the practical implementation of new imaging technology. The medical physicist must navigate the complexities of ensuring patient safety and diagnostic accuracy, while also facilitating the adoption of innovative tools. This requires a nuanced understanding of regulatory expectation, clinical workflow, and the inherent risks associated with unvalidated processes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic, evidence-based integration of the new technology. This aligns with the core responsibilities of a medical physicist as outlined by regulatory bodies, such as the American Association of Physicists in Medicine (APAM) and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission (NRC) in the U.S. Specifically, it upholds the principle of ensuring that all medical equipment, including new modalities, undergoes rigorous testing, calibration, and quality assurance before clinical use. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of misdiagnosis, radiation overexposure, and other patient harm, thereby fulfilling the physicist's ethical and regulatory obligations to patient safety and quality of care. It also supports the institution's commitment to maintaining high standards of medical practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately deploying the technology without adequate validation. This directly violates regulatory requirements for equipment performance verification and quality control, potentially leading to patient safety incidents and noncompliance with standards set by bodies like the Joint Commission. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to patients. Another incorrect approach focuses solely on the technical specifications of the new equipment, neglecting the crucial aspect of clinical integration and workflow impact. While technical performance is vital, the role of the medical physicist extends to ensuring that the technology functions effectively within the broader clinical context. Ignoring this aspect can lead to inefficiencies, user errors, and ultimately compromise patient care, contravening the comprehensive scope of practice expected of a certified medical physicist. A third incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost-effectiveness over thorough validation, is also professionally unacceptable. While fiscal responsibility is important, it must never supersede patient safety and regulatory compliance. Expediting deployment to save costs without proper due diligence exposes patients to undue risks and can result in significant financial and reputational damage to the institution if adverse events occur, representing a clear ethical lapse and potential regulatory violation. Professional reasoning. Medical physicists should approach the introduction of new technologies by first consulting relevant professional guidelines and regulatory mandates. A structured process involving risk assessment, protocol development, comprehensive testing, including phantom studies and initial clinical trials, and staff training is essential. Collaboration with clinical stakeholders, including physicians and technologists, is paramount to ensure seamless integration and optimal utilization. Any deviation from a rigorous validation process, especially when driven by expediency or cost, should be flagged and addressed through established institutional governance channels. Question 7. Process analysis reveals a situation where a referring physician requests a modification to a standard radiation therapy treatment plan for a patient with a complex anatomical presentation, suggesting a deviation from established dose delivery parameters that could potentially increase radiation exposure to surrounding healthy tissues. The medical physicist is tasked with evaluating this request. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the medical physicist to ensure radiation safety and regulatory compliance? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed modification, assessing its radiation safety implications and potential impact on dose to critical organs, and consult with the Radiation Safety Officer, RSO, and the Radiation Safety Committee, RSC, to determine if the deviation is permissible under current regulations and institutional policies before proceeding. Option B. Inform the referring physician that the requested modification is not possible due to strict adherence to established protocols and regulatory guidelines, without further investigation into the specific clinical rationale or potential safe alternatives. Option C. Immediately implement the requested modification to the treatment plan, prioritizing the referring physician's clinical judgment and the perceived urgency of the patient's condition to avoid delaying treatment. Option D. Proceed with the modification as requested by the referring physician, assuming their clinical expertise supersedes the need for formal radiation safety review, and document the change in the patient's record. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the proposed modification, assessing its radiation safety implications and potential impact on dose to critical organs, and consult with the Radiation Safety Officer, RSO, and the Radiation Safety Committee, RSC, to determine if the deviation is permissible under current regulations and institutional policies before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires balancing immediate patient care needs with established radiation safety protocols and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in the potential for a perceived conflict between expediency and safety, where a deviation from standard procedure might seem beneficial in the short term, but could have long-term implications for patient and staff safety, as well as legal and ethical standing. The medical physicist must exercise sound judgment, drawing upon their expertise in radiation physics, biology, and regulatory requirements to make a decision that upholds the highest standards of care and safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the situation against established institutional policies and relevant regulatory guidelines. This includes consulting the Radiation Safety Officer, RSO, and potentially the Radiation Safety Committee, RSC, if the situation falls outside routine protocols or involves significant deviations. This approach represents best professional practice because it ensures that any decision is made within the framework of established safety standards, regulatory compliance, e.g., Nuclear Regulatory Commission (NRC) regulations in the U.S., or equivalent national bodies, and ethical considerations. It prioritizes a systematic, documented, and collaborative decision-making process, which is crucial for accountability and continuous improvement in radiation safety. This aligns with the fundamental principle of ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, and the professional responsibility to protect individuals from unnecessary radiation exposure. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the requested deviation without proper consultation or adherence to established protocols. This could involve making an on-the-spot decision based solely on the perceived urgency of the clinical situation, without fully assessing the radiation safety implications. Such an approach would represent a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses established safety oversight mechanisms designed to prevent radiation overexposure. Ethically, it fails to uphold the duty of care to both the patient and staff by potentially exposing them to unmanaged radiation risks. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the request outright without a proper safety assessment, potentially hindering necessary patient care. This would also be professionally unsound, as it fails to engage in a problem-solving process that seeks to find a safe and compliant solution. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and compliance. This framework typically involves 1. Understanding the request in its clinical context. 2. Identifying potential radiation safety risks associated with the proposed deviation. 3. Consulting relevant institutional policies, procedures, and regulatory requirements. 4. Engaging with the RSO and/or RSC for guidance and approval, especially for non-routine situations. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the final decision. 6. Implementing the approved course of action with appropriate monitoring and follow-up. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the highest professional and regulatory standards. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate probability of a significant adverse event if a physician's urgent request to modify a patient's treatment plan mid-course, deviating from the approved protocol, is implemented without a full peer review and departmental approval. The physician states the change is critical for patient comfort and potential outcome improvement, but the exact dosimetric implications and potential for increased toxicity are not fully elaborated. What is the most appropriate course of action for the medical physicist? Option A. Proceed with the requested modification immediately to address the physician's concern for patient comfort and potential outcome improvement, documenting the change retrospectively. Option B. Initiate a formal review process involving the radiation oncology team, including the RSO, to assess the clinical rationale, potential risks and benefits of the proposed modification, and ensure it aligns with institutional policies and regulatory guidelines before implementation. Option C. Implement a partial modification based on the physicist's best judgment of the physician's intent, while awaiting further clarification from the physician. Option D. Inform the physician that the request cannot be accommodated due to the deviation from the established protocol and the lack of immediate supporting data. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the requested modification immediately to address the physician's concern for patient comfort and potential outcome improvement, documenting the change retrospectively. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between established clinical protocols and a physician's emergent request that deviates from those protocols, potentially impacting patient safety and the integrity of the treatment plan. The medical physicist must balance adherence to approved procedures, which are designed to ensure consistent and safe patient care, with the physician's clinical judgment and the patient's specific needs. The physicist's responsibility extends beyond technical execution to ensuring the safety and efficacy of the radiation therapy, requiring careful consideration of the implications of any deviation. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of the physician's request, assessing its clinical rationale, potential risks and benefits, and its compatibility with established institutional policies and regulatory guidelines. This includes consulting with the radiation oncology team, potentially the radiation safety officer, RSO, and ensuring that any approved deviation is properly justified, documented, and implemented with appropriate quality assurance measures. This aligns with the principles of patient safety, professional responsibility, and adherence to regulatory frameworks that govern radiation therapy practice, such as those outlined by the American Association of Physicists in Medicine (APAM) and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission (NRC) in the United States. The physicist acts as a gatekeeper, ensuring that patient care remains within safe and effective parameters, while also being responsive to clinical needs. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the physician's request without proper review. This fails to uphold the physicist's professional responsibility to ensure patient safety and could lead to unintended consequences, such as under- or overdosing, or compromising the integrity of the treatment plan. This also bypasses established quality assurance procedures, which are critical for regulatory compliance and patient protection. Another incorrect approach would be to outright refuse the request without engaging in a discussion or review process. While adherence to protocols is important, a rigid refusal without considering the clinical context or exploring potential safe modifications could be seen as a failure to collaborate and a disregard for the physician's clinical expertise, potentially impacting patient care. This could also lead to a breakdown in the interdisciplinary team approach essential for effective radiation oncology. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a structured approach. First, understanding the request in its clinical context. Second, evaluating the request against established protocols, institutional policies, and regulatory requirements. Third, consulting with relevant stakeholders, e.g., physician, RSO, other physicists, to gather information and assess risks. Fourth, documenting the review process, the decision, and any justifications or modifications. And finally, implementing the approved plan with appropriate quality assurance. This systematic process ensures that decisions are evidence-based, safe, and compliant. Question 9. The efficiency study reveals that several radiopharmaceuticals used in routine myocardial perfusion imaging exhibit significantly lower than expected count rates per unit of injected activity, potentially impacting image quality and increasing patient dose. Which of the following represents the most appropriate risk assessment approach for addressing these findings? Option A. Document the findings in the quality assurance log, but defer any corrective actions until a future comprehensive equipment upgrade, as the current deviations are within acceptable historical variability. Option B. Immediately cease the use of all radiopharmaceuticals exhibiting lower than expected count rates and switch to alternative agents to ensure optimal imaging performance and minimize potential dose escalation. Option C. Conduct a detailed investigation into the specific radiopharmaceuticals and imaging protocols involved to determine the root cause of the reduced count rates, assess the impact on diagnostic accuracy and patient dose for each identified instance, and prioritize corrective actions based on the severity of the risk. Option D. Implement a blanket increase in injected activity for all myocardial perfusion studies to compensate for the lower count rates, assuming this will maintain image quality and diagnostic efficacy. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed investigation into the specific radiopharmaceuticals and imaging protocols involved to determine the root cause of the reduced count rates, assess the impact on diagnostic accuracy and patient dose for each identified instance, and prioritize corrective actions based on the severity of the risk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a medical physicist to interpret the results of an efficiency study in nuclear medicine and translate those findings into a practical, risk-informed approach to patient care and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for optimal imaging performance with the imperative to minimize radiation dose to patients and staff, all within the strict confines of regulatory requirements. Failure to properly assess and mitigate risks identified by the efficiency study could lead to suboptimal diagnostic accuracy, unnecessary radiation exposure, and potential regulatory noncompliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment that prioritizes actions based on the potential impact of the identified inefficiencies on patient safety, diagnostic quality, and regulatory adherence. This aligns with the fundamental principles of radiation safety and quality assurance mandated by regulatory bodies. By focusing on the most significant deviations and their potential consequences, the medical physicist can allocate resources effectively, implement targeted corrective actions, and ensure that the nuclear medicine program operates within acceptable risk parameters. This proactive and evidence-based approach is the cornerstone of best professional practice, ensuring both patient well-being and operational integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to disregard the efficiency study findings entirely, assuming current practices are adequate. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Regulations typically require ongoing quality assurance and performance monitoring. Ignoring data that suggests potential inefficiencies or suboptimal performance violates the principle of ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, for radiation dose and the commitment to providing high-quality diagnostic information. It also fails to meet the implicit or explicit requirements for continuous improvement in medical imaging. Another incorrect approach would be to implement widespread, indiscriminate changes to all imaging protocols without a thorough risk assessment. This is inefficient and potentially counterproductive. It fails to acknowledge that not all inefficiencies carry the same level of risk. Implementing changes without understanding their impact on diagnostic accuracy or patient dose could lead to unintended negative consequences, such as increased scan times or unnecessary protocol modifications that do not address the root cause of the inefficiency. This approach lacks the professional judgment required to prioritize and target interventions effectively. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on achieving theoretical maximum efficiency without considering the practical implications for patient care or regulatory constraints. While efficiency is important, it should not come at the expense of patient safety, diagnostic image quality, or adherence to established dose limits and regulatory standards. This approach risks over-optimizing for a single metric, while neglecting other critical aspects of nuclear medicine practice. Professional reasoning. When faced with the results of an efficiency study, a medical physicist should employ a structured decision-making process. This begins with a thorough understanding of the study's findings and their potential implications. The next step is to categorize the identified inefficiencies by their potential impact on patient dose, image quality, and operational workflow. A risk matrix or similar tool can be helpful here. Based on this risk assessment, the physicist should then prioritize corrective actions, focusing on those that address the highest risks first. This involves developing a plan for implementation, monitoring the effectiveness of the changes, and documenting all actions taken. Throughout this process, adherence to relevant regulations, professional guidelines, and ethical principles is paramount. Question 10. Benchmark analysis indicates that a novel radiation therapy technique is being considered for clinical implementation, promising improved dose conformity to the target volume. However, the underlying physics of the beam generation and interaction with tissue are complex and not fully characterized in the peer-reviewed literature. The physicist is asked to approve its use for patient treatment. Which of the following represents the most ethically and professionally responsible approach? Option A. Proceed with the clinical implementation of the novel technique based on the manufacturer's assurances of its efficacy and safety, as it represents a significant technological advancement. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the fundamental radiation physics principles governing the novel technique, including beam characteristics, dose deposition, and potential secondary radiation, and seek expert consultation to validate findings before approving its use. Option C. Rely on the anecdotal experiences and informal recommendations of other clinicians who have briefly encountered similar technologies to guide the decision on implementation. Option D. Reject the novel technique outright due to the inherent uncertainties and lack of extensive published data, opting for established, well-understood treatment modalities. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the fundamental radiation physics principles governing the novel technique, including beam characteristics, dose deposition, and potential secondary radiation, and seek expert consultation to validate findings before approving its use. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a medical physicist must balance the immediate need for patient treatment with the potential for long-term, subtle radiation-induced effects that are not fully understood or easily detectable. The ethical dilemma arises from the uncertainty surrounding the precise risks of a novel technique and the physicist's responsibility to both patient well-being and the advancement of medical practice. The physicist must exercise sound judgment, relying on established principles of radiation physics and risk assessment, while acknowledging the limitations of current knowledge. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of the fundamental radiation physics principles governing the novel treatment modality. This involves critically evaluating the energy deposition characteristics, dose distribution, and potential for secondary radiation production. By consulting established literature, seeking expert opinion, and performing independent verification of the physics calculations, the physicist ensures that the treatment plan is based on sound scientific principles and minimizes unnecessary radiation exposure. This aligns with the ethical imperative to provide safe and effective patient care, adhering to the ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, principle, and upholding professional standards of due diligence and evidence-based practice. Regulatory frameworks for medical physics typically mandate a comprehensive understanding and application of radiation physics principles in treatment planning and delivery. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the novel technique based solely on the manufacturer's assurances without independent verification. This fails to uphold the physicist's professional responsibility to critically evaluate all aspects of a treatment modality. It bypasses the fundamental requirement to understand the underlying physics and its implications for patient safety, potentially leading to unforeseen complications or suboptimal treatment outcomes. This approach disregards the ethical obligation to act in the patient's best interest and may violate regulatory requirements for independent quality assurance. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the novel technique entirely due to the inherent uncertainties, thereby denying the patient a potentially beneficial treatment. Caution is warranted. Outright rejection without a thorough physics-based evaluation is not professionally sound. It fails to acknowledge the potential for innovation and the physicist's role in carefully assessing and integrating new technologies. This approach can hinder medical progress and may not be in the patient's best interest if the risks are manageable and the benefits significant. This can be seen as a failure to exercise professional judgment and a lack of commitment to exploring advancements that could improve patient care. A third incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or the experience of colleagues without a rigorous physics-based assessment. While collegial consultation is valuable, it cannot substitute for a fundamental understanding of the radiation physics involved. Anecdotal evidence may be biased or incomplete and does not provide the objective data necessary for informed decision-making regarding patient safety and treatment efficacy. This approach lacks the scientific rigor expected of a medical physicist and could lead to the adoption of unsafe practices or the rejection of beneficial technologies based on incomplete information. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such dilemmas by first identifying the core ethical and professional responsibilities. This involves a systematic process of information gathering, critical analysis, and risk-benefit assessment. The physicist should leverage their foundational knowledge of radiation physics to understand the proposed technique's mechanisms, potential interactions with biological tissues, and associated radiation fields. Seeking expert consultation, reviewing relevant scientific literature, and performing independent calculations are crucial steps. The decision-making process should be guided by established principles of patient safety, the ALARA principle, and regulatory requirements, ensuring that any new modality is implemented only after a thorough and documented evaluation of its physical basis and potential implications. Question 11. Market research demonstrates that healthcare providers are increasingly seeking precise, evidence-based assessments of potential radiation-induced biological effects following diagnostic or therapeutic procedures, particularly when unexpected dose variations occur. A medical physicist is consulted regarding a patient who received a radiation dose slightly higher than intended during a specialized imaging procedure. The physicist's primary responsibility is to provide an accurate and actionable assessment of the potential biological consequences for this individual patient. Which of the following approaches best fulfills this professional obligation within the U.S. regulatory framework for medical radiation? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the patient's specific exposure parameters. Consult relevant scientific literature on dose-response relationships for the exposed tissues, and cross-reference findings with established radiation protection guidelines and regulatory limits, e.g., NCRP, FDA recommendations, to provide a risk-stratified assessment to the referring physician. Option B. Rely on general knowledge of radiation biology and past experiences with similar incidents to provide a qualitative assessment, without consulting specific dose-response data or current regulatory guidance. Option C. Immediately inform the patient and referring physician that the dose variation is likely inconsequential, as modern imaging techniques are generally safe, and no further investigation is warranted unless symptoms develop. Option D. Recommend immediate, invasive diagnostic testing for the patient to rule out any potential long-term radiation damage, regardless of the magnitude of the dose variation or the specific tissues involved. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the patient's specific exposure parameters. Consult relevant scientific literature on dose-response relationships for the exposed tissues, and cross-reference findings with established radiation protection guidelines and regulatory limits, e.g., NCRP, FDA recommendations, to provide a risk-stratified assessment to the referring physician. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a medical physicist to interpret and apply complex biological radiation effects data in the context of patient care and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the need for accurate risk assessment with the inherent uncertainties in biological response, while also adhering to established safety standards and ethical obligations to patients. The physicist must consider not only deterministic and stochastic effects, but also the nuances of dose-response relationships across different tissues and exposure scenarios. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the patient's specific clinical situation, including the type and dose of radiation administered, the exposed tissues, and the patient's individual risk factors. This is followed by consulting established scientific literature and regulatory guidelines, e.g., NCRP reports, ICAP publications, relevant FDA regulations for medical devices and radiation-producing equipment, to determine the potential biological effects and their associated risks. The physicist then communicates these findings clearly and concisely to the referring physician, enabling informed clinical decision-making and patient management. This approach aligns with the professional responsibility to ensure patient safety and optimize radiation use, as mandated by regulatory bodies overseeing medical radiation practices. It emphasizes evidence-based practice and interdisciplinary collaboration. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to dismiss the reported dose as insignificant without a proper risk assessment. This fails to acknowledge the principle of as low as reasonably achievable, ALARA, and the potential for cumulative effects or individual radiosensitivity, which are fundamental to radiation protection regulations, represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential violation of professional standards of care. Another incorrect approach would be to overstate the risks or recommend unnecessary interventions based on generalized fears rather than specific scientific evidence. This could lead to undue patient anxiety and potentially harmful medical interventions, violating ethical principles of beneficence and non-maleficence. It also deviates from the regulatory requirement for evidence-based risk assessment. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or personal experience without consulting current scientific literature or regulatory guidance. This is professionally unsound and can lead to outdated or inaccurate assessments, potentially compromising patient safety and contravening regulatory expectations for up-to-date knowledge and practice. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a systematic approach. 1. Understand the clinical context and the radiation exposure. 2. Access and critically evaluate relevant scientific data on radiation biology and toxicology. 3. Consult applicable regulatory standards and guidelines. 4. Quantify risks where possible, acknowledging uncertainties. 5. Communicate findings clearly and objectively to the clinical team. 6. Document the assessment and recommendations. This process ensures that decisions are grounded in scientific evidence, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations, prioritizing patient well-being. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates that during a critical dosimetry verification procedure for a patient's radiation therapy treatment plan, the patient expresses significant discomfort with the required immobilization device, leading to potential movement. The medical physicist is aware that any movement during the verification process could compromise the accuracy of the dose calculation and delivery. What is the most appropriate course of action for the medical physicist? Option A. Adjust the dosimetry parameters to account for potential minor patient movement, assuming the patient's discomfort is temporary and will not significantly impact the verification. Option B. Proceed with the dosimetry verification as planned, ensuring the patient understands the importance of remaining still and document the patient's discomfort. Option C. Inform the patient that their discomfort cannot be accommodated due to the critical nature of the dosimetry verification and proceed without further discussion. Option D. Temporarily pause the verification, communicate with the radiation oncology team to explore options for improving patient comfort or adjusting the immobilization, and then re-verify positioning and dosimetry if any changes are made. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the dosimetry verification as planned, ensuring the patient understands the importance of remaining still and document the patient's discomfort. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the immediate perceived benefit of a patient's comfort against the fundamental principles of accurate and safe radiation dosimetry, which are paramount in medical physics practice. The physicist must balance patient well-being with adherence to established protocols designed to ensure therapeutic efficacy and minimize unintended harm. The core of the dilemma lies in the potential for a deviation from standard practice, even if seemingly minor, to compromise the integrity of the treatment plan and its intended dose delivery. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the established, evidence-based protocols for dosimetry verification, adhering to the established calibration procedures, even when faced with a patient's discomfort, ensures that the delivered dose is precisely known and consistent with the treatment plan. This upholds the physicist's responsibility to the patient, the referring physician, and the regulatory framework, which mandates accurate dose delivery for effective treatment and patient safety. The regulatory framework for medical physics practice, as exemplified by standards and guidelines relevant to the Certified Medical Physicist exam, emphasizes the critical importance of accurate dose measurement and verification. Deviations without rigorous justification and re-verification can lead to under- or overdosing, impacting treatment outcomes and potentially causing adverse effects. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing or altering the standard dosimetry verification process without proper justification and recalibration would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could be interpreted as a failure to uphold professional standards of care, potentially leading to a compromised treatment plan. Specifically, it would violate the principle of do no harm by introducing uncertainty into the delivered dose. Furthermore, it would likely contravene specific regulations or guidelines that mandate adherence to established quality assurance and calibration procedures for radiation therapy equipment and treatment planning. Such a failure undermines the trust placed in medical physicists to ensure the safe and effective use of radiation in medicine. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding with the treatment without addressing the patient's discomfort and the potential for movement, also poses a risk. While it prioritizes the treatment schedule, it fails to acknowledge that patient movement during treatment delivery can significantly alter the intended dose distribution, leading to underdosing of the target volume or overdosing of surrounding healthy tissues. This is a failure in ensuring the accuracy and efficacy of the treatment, which is a core responsibility of the medical physicist. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the situation. First, the physicist must clearly identify the conflict between patient comfort and the integrity of the dosimetry process. Second, they should consult relevant protocols and guidelines to understand the requirements for dose verification and patient positioning. Third, they should communicate effectively with the radiation oncology team, including the physician and therapist, to discuss the patient's discomfort and explore potential solutions that do not compromise dosimetry. This might involve adjusting the treatment schedule, exploring patient positioning aids, or, if absolutely necessary and within established protocols, considering a brief interruption for patient comfort followed by a re-verification of positioning. The ultimate decision must prioritize the accurate and safe delivery of radiation, as dictated by the treatment plan and regulatory requirements. Question 13. Strategic planning requires the development of a comprehensive quality management program for stereotactic radiosurgery, SRS, and stereotactic body radiation therapy, SBRT services. Which of the following best reflects the essential components of such a program to ensure regulatory compliance and patient safety in the United States? Option A. Focusing exclusively on the technical accuracy of the treatment planning software, without establishing independent verification procedures or comprehensive quality assurance checks for the entire treatment chain. Option B. Implementing a system that prioritizes rapid treatment delivery by streamlining the treatment planning and verification processes, relying primarily on the expertise of the treating physician. Option C. Developing a set of informal guidelines based on anecdotal evidence and individual practitioner experience, without formal documentation or regular review by a multidisciplinary team. Option D. Establishing detailed protocols for patient selection, treatment planning, image guidance, dose verification, and ongoing quality control, integrated into a formal, documented quality management system. The correct answer is D. Establishing detailed protocols for patient selection, treatment planning, image guidance, dose verification, and ongoing quality control, integrated into a formal, documented quality management system. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent risks associated with stereotactic radiosurgery, SRS, and stereotactic body radiation therapy, SBRT. These techniques involve delivering highly conformal, high-dose radiation to small, well-defined targets, often near critical structures. Ensuring patient safety and treatment efficacy requires meticulous adherence to established protocols, rigorous quality assurance, and a deep understanding of regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the therapeutic benefits of these advanced techniques with the potential for significant harm if not executed with the utmost precision and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the establishment of a comprehensive quality management program specifically tailored to SRS/SBRT. This aligns directly with the principles of radiation safety and quality assurance mandated by regulatory bodies such as the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for medical devices and radiation-producing equipment. A robust program includes detailed protocols for patient selection, treatment planning, image guidance, dose delivery, and ongoing quality control. This proactive, systematic approach minimizes the likelihood of errors, ensures consistent and accurate treatment delivery, and directly addresses the regulatory expectation for safe and effective use of radiation in medical applications. It reflects best professional practice by prioritizing patient well-being through a framework of continuous improvement and risk mitigation, as expected by regulatory oversight. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the technical aspects of treatment planning, without integrating comprehensive quality assurance and regulatory oversight. This fails to meet regulatory requirements that extend beyond the planning phase to encompass the entire treatment process, including verification of delivery and post-treatment evaluation. It represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure by neglecting critical safety checks and balances. Another incorrect approach prioritizes speed of treatment delivery over rigorous protocol adherence and independent verification. This directly contravenes regulatory mandates for meticulous quality control and safety checks, particularly for high-dose, precision techniques like SRS/SBRT. Such an approach introduces unacceptable risks of treatment errors, leading to potential patient harm and regulatory noncompliance. A third incorrect approach involves relying solely on the experience of individual practitioners without formalizing these practices into a documented, auditable quality management system. While experience is valuable, it does not substitute for the systematic, reproducible processes required by regulatory bodies to ensure consistent quality and safety across all treatments and practitioners. This approach lacks the transparency and accountability demanded by regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing decisions regarding SRS/SBRT should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., 10 CFR Part 20, 10 CFR Part 35, FDA guidance on SRS/SBRT devices. This understanding should then inform the development and implementation of a comprehensive quality management program that addresses all phases of treatment. The process should involve multidisciplinary team collaboration, regular protocol review and updates, and a commitment to continuous learning and improvement. Risk assessment and mitigation strategies should be integral to the planning and execution of all SRS/SBRT procedures, ensuring that patient safety remains the paramount consideration, in full alignment with regulatory expectations. Question 14. Compliance review shows that a diagnostic imaging system, critical for urgent patient diagnosis, has not undergone its scheduled comprehensive performance evaluation due to a backlog of clinical procedures. The medical physicist is considering whether to allow the system to continue in clinical use pending the evaluation or to temporarily suspend its use until the evaluation is completed. Option A. Allow the system to continue in clinical use, prioritizing immediate patient diagnosis, and schedule the performance evaluation as soon as possible. Option B. Rely on the clinical operator's report of satisfactory image quality to justify continued use of the system. Option C. Proceed with a limited visual inspection of the system and a brief functional check, deeming it sufficient given the urgency. Option D. Immediately suspend the use of the imaging system for all patient procedures until the comprehensive performance evaluation is completed and all parameters are verified. The correct answer is A. Allow the system to continue in clinical use, prioritizing immediate patient diagnosis, and schedule the performance evaluation as soon as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical physics practice, balancing the need for timely patient care with the imperative of adhering to established safety protocols and regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in the potential for a perceived conflict between immediate clinical needs and the systematic, evidence-based approach mandated by regulations. A medical physicist must exercise sound professional judgment, drawing upon their understanding of fundamental principles, regulatory frameworks, and ethical obligations to ensure patient safety and diagnostic accuracy without compromising established best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, systematic evaluation of the imaging system's performance against established benchmarks and regulatory standards. This aligns with the fundamental principles of medical physics, which emphasize the importance of quality assurance and quality control to ensure the reliability and safety of medical imaging equipment. Specifically, adherence to the regulatory framework for medical imaging equipment performance, as outlined by the relevant U.S. authorities, e.g., FDA, state licensing bodies, is paramount. This includes verifying that the system meets all specified performance characteristics, such as image quality metrics and radiation output consistency, before it is used for patient imaging. This systematic approach ensures that any potential issues are identified and rectified, thereby preventing the delivery of suboptimal diagnostic information or unnecessary radiation exposure to patients. It embodies the principle of do no harm and upholds the professional responsibility to maintain equipment integrity. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would be to bypass or expedite the standard quality assurance procedures due to time constraints or perceived urgency. This directly violates regulatory requirements that mandate regular and thorough performance evaluations of medical imaging equipment. Such a failure to adhere to established protocols introduces significant risks, including the possibility of misdiagnosis due to poor image quality, increased radiation dose to patients and staff, and potential equipment malfunction that could lead to further complications. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a disregard for patient safety and professional accountability. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the operator's subjective assessment of image quality without objective, quantitative measurements. This is professionally unacceptable, as it lacks the rigor and objectivity required for medical physics evaluations, and fails to meet the standards set by regulatory bodies for ensuring equipment performance. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such situations should first acknowledge the clinical urgency, but immediately prioritize adherence to regulatory mandates and established quality assurance protocols. The decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly identifying the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the equipment and procedure in question. 2. Assessing the potential risks to patient safety and diagnostic accuracy if the standard procedures are not followed. 3. Communicating effectively with clinical staff about the necessity of the QA process and any potential impact on scheduling, while also exploring options for expedited but still compliant QA if feasible. 4. Documenting all decisions and actions taken, including any deviations from standard practice, which should be rare and heavily justified. The overarching principle is that patient safety and diagnostic integrity, underpinned by regulatory compliance, must never be compromised for expediency. Question 15. The audit findings indicate a statistically significant increase in patient radiation doses for a specific CT imaging protocol compared to established institutional benchmarks and national reference levels. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the medical physicist? Option A. Initiate a detailed investigation into the specific imaging protocol, including review of patient selection criteria, imaging parameters, equipment performance logs, and technologist technique variations, to identify contributing factors to the dose increase. Option B. Update the institutional benchmarks to reflect the observed higher doses, thereby bringing the protocol into compliance with the new, higher reference levels. Option C. Assume the increase is due to technologist variability and implement mandatory retraining for all CT technologists on standard imaging protocols. Option D. Advise the radiology department to immediately cease using the implicated CT protocol until further notice to prevent potential overexposure. The correct answer is A. Initiate a detailed investigation into the specific imaging protocol, including review of patient selection criteria, imaging parameters, equipment performance logs, and technologist technique variations, to identify contributing factors to the dose increase. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for diagnostic information with the long-term imperative of radiation safety and compliance. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in established protocols, necessitating a proactive and informed response from the medical physicist. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the deviation and implementing corrective actions that are both effective and compliant with regulatory standards, without compromising patient care or diagnostic quality. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the specific circumstances leading to the observed dose variations. This includes reviewing patient protocols, equipment performance, and technologist practices. The medical physicist must then collaborate with the clinical team to identify the most appropriate and evidence-based strategies for dose optimization, ensuring these strategies align with current regulatory guidelines and best practices for radiation dose management in diagnostic imaging. This approach upholds the principle of ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, while ensuring diagnostic efficacy, and demonstrates adherence to the responsibilities outlined by regulatory bodies governing medical physics practice. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as minor variations without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for systemic issues that could lead to suboptimal radiation use and increased patient risk over time. It neglects the regulatory obligation to monitor and manage radiation doses, potentially violating principles of patient safety and quality assurance. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement sweeping changes to all imaging protocols without a targeted investigation. This could disrupt established clinical workflows, potentially compromise diagnostic image quality, and may not address the actual root cause of the dose variations. It lacks the systematic, evidence-based approach required for effective quality improvement and regulatory compliance. A third incorrect approach would be to solely attribute the variations to technologist error without considering equipment performance or protocol deficiencies. This is an oversimplification that can lead to an incomplete solution and may unfairly place blame. A comprehensive review requires examining all contributing factors, including equipment calibration, imaging parameters, and protocol appropriateness, as mandated by a thorough quality management program. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by initiating a systematic review process. This involves data collection and analysis, identifying deviations from established benchmarks or protocols, and then conducting a root cause analysis. Collaboration with stakeholders, including radiologists, technologists, and administrators, is crucial for developing and implementing effective solutions. The decision-making process should be guided by regulatory requirements, ethical consideration, and the pursuit of optimal patient outcomes through safe and effective diagnostic imaging. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals that the new treatment planning system, TPS, offers a significant reduction in planning time per patient. However, before fully integrating this new TPS into routine clinical practice for all patient treatments, what is the most critical step a medical physics department must undertake to ensure patient safety and regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement the new TPS for a small subset of patients and monitor their outcomes without a formal, independent validation protocol. Option B. Immediately deploy the new TPS for all patient treatments to capitalize on the identified efficiency gains and reduce departmental workload. Option C. Rely solely on the vendor's provided quality assurance reports and internal testing data for the new TPS. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive independent validation and verification of the new TPS's dose calculation algorithms, image processing, and plan generation capabilities against established benchmarks and phantom measurements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive independent validation and verification of the new TPS's dose calculation algorithms, image processing, and plan generation capabilities against established benchmarks and phantom measurements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical physics practice, balancing the drive for efficiency with the paramount requirement of patient safety and regulatory compliance. The introduction of a new treatment planning system, TPS, promises improved workflow, but its integration must be meticulously managed to avoid compromising the accuracy and safety of radiation therapy. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with a new technology, ensuring that the perceived efficiency gains do not lead to unintended consequences for patient care. This requires a thorough understanding of the TPS's capabilities, limitations, and the regulatory framework governing its implementation and use. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive validation and verification process before widespread clinical adoption. This aligns directly with regulatory requirements that mandate the accurate and safe use of medical equipment. Specifically, regulations governing medical devices and radiation therapy equipment, such as those enforced by the FDA in the U.S. or equivalent bodies in other jurisdictions, require that TPS be thoroughly tested to ensure they accurately calculate dose distributions and treatment parameters. This validation process typically involves comparing TPS calculations against established benchmarks, phantom measurements, and independent dose calculation. It also includes verifying that the system's user interface, data handling, and output are reliable and interpretable by clinical staff. This systematic approach ensures that the TPS performs as intended, minimizing the risk of treatment errors and upholding the highest standards of patient care, which is the core ethical and regulatory obligation of a medical physicist. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing the new TPS for all patients based solely on vendor claims of efficiency. This bypasses essential validation and verification steps, creating a significant risk of inaccurate treatment planning. Regulatory bodies would view this as a failure to exercise due diligence and a direct violation of requirements for ensuring the safe and effective use of medical technology. Ethically, it represents a departure from the principle of do no harm. Another incorrect approach might be to implement the TPS for a limited set of patients without a robust plan for ongoing monitoring and comparison with the old system. While seemingly a compromise, this still carries risks. If the validation is not comprehensive, subtle errors could go undetected, impacting those limited patients. Furthermore, it fails to establish a baseline for comparison and may not fully uncover system-wide issues. This approach could be seen as a partial compliance, but not best practice, and could still lead to regulatory scrutiny if patient outcomes are negatively affected. A third incorrect approach could be to rely solely on the vendor's internal testing and quality assurance without independent verification by the clinical physics team. While vendors have their own QA processes, regulatory frameworks and professional best practices mandate that the end-user institution perform its own independent validation to ensure the system meets the specific needs and clinical protocols of the department. Failure to do so could be interpreted as an abdication of responsibility and a potential violation of quality assurance mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the implementation of new TPS with a structured, risk-based methodology. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the regulatory requirements for TPS validation and use in their specific jurisdiction. 2. Developing a detailed validation plan that includes independent checks, phantom studies, and comparison with existing systems. 3. Phased implementation, starting with non-clinical testing, then potentially a limited clinical rollout with close monitoring, before full integration. 4. Establishing clear protocols for ongoing quality assurance and performance monitoring of the TPS. 5. Ensuring adequate training for all clinical staff who will interact with the system. This systematic process ensures that efficiency gains are realized without compromising patient safety or regulatory compliance. Question 17. Comparative studies suggest that the introduction of novel PET radiotracers with varying physical properties and decay characteristics can significantly impact scanner performance and image reconstruction algorithms. When a medical physics department plans to integrate a new PET radiotracer into routine clinical practice, which of the following approaches best ensures ongoing compliance with regulatory requirements for quality control and patient safety? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review and validation of existing quality control procedures to ensure they adequately assess the performance of the PET scanner with the new radiotracer, aligning with current regulatory standards and professional guidelines. Option B. Implement a new quality control protocol based solely on the recommendations provided by the PET scanner manufacturer, without independent verification against regulatory requirements. Option C. Continue using the previously established quality control protocol without modification, assuming it is sufficiently robust for all PET radiotracers. Option D. Develop a simplified quality control protocol that prioritizes speed and throughput, focusing only on the most basic performance metrics. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review and validation of existing quality control procedures to ensure they adequately assess the performance of the PET scanner with the new radiotracer, aligning with current regulatory standards and professional guidelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in PET imaging, balancing the desire for improved image quality and patient throughput with the practical constraints of regulatory compliance and radiation safety. The introduction of new PET radiotracers with different physical characteristics and decay schemes necessitates a re-evaluation of established quality control (QC) procedures. The challenge lies in ensuring that QC methods are not only effective in detecting performance drifts, but also align with current regulatory expectations for medical imaging devices, specifically those pertaining to nuclear medicine and PET. Failure to adapt QC protocols can lead to suboptimal image quality, inaccurate diagnostic information, and potential radiation safety concerns for both patients and staff. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review and validation of QC procedures against current regulatory standards and best practices for PET imaging. This includes consulting relevant guidelines from bodies like the ACR, American College of Radiology, or similar national professional organizations that provide specific recommendations for PET QC, as well as adhering to the licensing and accreditation requirements of regulatory agencies such as the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, for device performance and state or federal agencies for radiation safety. The process should involve verifying that the chosen QC phantoms, acquisition parameters, and analysis methods are appropriate for the specific radio tracer and scanner technology being used, and that the frequency of QC testing meets or exceeds regulatory minimums. This ensures that the PET system's performance is consistently monitored, leading to reliable diagnostic images and safe operation, thereby upholding professional responsibility and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing with the previous QC protocol without revalidation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It implies a disregard for the potential impact of new radio tracers on scanner performance and image quality, potentially leading to misdiagnosis. This approach fails to meet the implicit requirement of maintaining equipment performance within acceptable diagnostic limits, which is a cornerstone of medical imaging practice and often a condition of licensing and accreditation. Implementing a QC protocol solely based on vendor recommendations without independent verification against regulatory standards is also problematic. While vendor recommendations are valuable, they may not always encompass the full scope of regulatory requirements or address specific clinical needs and local operating conditions. This can lead to a QC program that is insufficient in detecting certain types of performance degradation or does not meet the stringent requirements of regulatory bodies, risking noncompliance. Adopting a QC protocol that prioritizes speed and efficiency over thoroughness, even if it appears to cover basic parameters, is another failure. Regulatory bodies expect QC to be comprehensive enough to ensure diagnostic accuracy and patient safety. A protocol that sacrifices essential checks for the sake of expediency may overlook critical performance issues, leading to compromised image quality and potential radiation safety breaches, which are direct violations of professional and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in medical physics must adopt a proactive and evidence-based approach to QC. When introducing new technologies or radio tracers, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying relevant regulatory requirements and professional guidelines for the specific modality and application. 2. Evaluating the impact of the new technology on existing QC procedures. 3. Selecting or adapting QC methods that are validated, appropriate for the technology, and meet or exceed regulatory standards. 4. Documenting the QC program and its validation. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating QC procedures as technology and regulations evolve. This systematic approach ensures that patient care is optimized, diagnostic accuracy is maintained, and regulatory compliance is consistently achieved. Question 18. Assessment of a patient undergoing a specialized fluoroscopic procedure reveals that direct application of optically stimulated luminescence, OSL, dosimeters to the skin surface is impractical due to the patient's anatomy and the required imaging angles, potentially leading to significant image artifacts and patient discomfort. The physicist must ensure accurate dose assessment for this procedure. Which of the following represents the most professionally appropriate course of action? Option A. Inform the referring physician that OSL dosimetry cannot be performed for this patient and therefore dose verification will not be conducted. Option B. Utilize an alternative OSL dosimetry method that can be indirectly applied or a surrogate measurement technique, while carefully considering its limitations and ensuring it provides a reasonable estimate of the delivered dose to critical organs, and document the rationale for this deviation from direct skin measurement. Option C. Omit OSL dosimetry for this specific procedure, relying solely on the machine's programmed dose parameters, as direct measurement is not feasible. Option D. Proceed with direct OSL measurement on the skin surface, accepting the potential for patient discomfort and image artifacts, as this is the standard method for OSL dosimetry. The correct answer is B. Utilize an alternative OSL dosimetry method that can be indirectly applied or a surrogate measurement technique, while carefully considering its limitations and ensuring it provides a reasonable estimate of the delivered dose to critical organs, and document the rationale for this deviation from direct skin measurement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma where a medical physicist must balance the need for accurate dosimetry with the potential for patient discomfort and the practical limitations of a specific technology. The challenge lies in determining the most appropriate method for dose verification when a standard approach is not feasible or ideal, requiring a judgment call that prioritizes patient well-being and diagnostic quality while adhering to professional standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes patient comfort and diagnostic image quality by utilizing an alternative, albeit less direct, method of OSL dosimetry that minimizes patient burden. This aligns with the ethical principle of beneficence, acting in the patient's best interest, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm. It also reflects professional responsibility to adapt techniques when necessary to achieve the best possible outcome, even if it requires a slightly more complex interpretation of the data. This approach implicitly acknowledges that while direct OSL measurement on the skin might be ideal for some applications, its practical implementation in this specific scenario could compromise the diagnostic value of the imaging or cause undue distress. The physicist's role is to ensure the diagnostic information is obtained with the least possible harm and inconvenience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with direct OSL measurement on the skin despite the patient's discomfort and potential for image artifact. This fails to uphold the principle of non-maleficence by causing unnecessary discomfort and potentially compromising the diagnostic quality of the imaging, which could lead to misdiagnosis or the need for repeat procedures. It also demonstrates a lack of professional judgment in adapting to patient-specific needs and technological limitations. Another incorrect approach is to forego OSL dosimetry entirely due to the perceived difficulty. This is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses a crucial quality assurance step without adequate justification. It neglects the responsibility to ensure accurate dose delivery and patient safety, potentially violating regulatory requirements for dose monitoring and quality control in medical imaging. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the machine's preset dose parameters without any independent verification. This abdicates the physicist's responsibility for quality assurance and dose monitoring. It assumes the machine's calibration and output are always accurate and appropriate for every patient, which is a dangerous assumption, and a failure to adhere to established professional and regulatory standards for radiation safety and efficacy. Professional reasoning. In situations like this, a medical physicist should engage in a systematic decision-making process. First, identify the core objective, accurate dose assessment for patient safety and diagnostic efficacy. Second, evaluate the available tools and their limitations in the context of the specific patient and procedure. Third, consider the ethical principles of beneficence, non-maleficence, and patient autonomy. Fourth, consult relevant professional guidelines and regulations. Finally, document the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen course of action, ensuring transparency and accountability. This involves a critical assessment of risks and benefits associated with each potential approach. Question 19. When evaluating a brachytherapy implant procedure, where the physician proposes a minor adjustment to the applicator placement mid-procedure due to observed anatomical variations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the medical physicist to ensure both clinical efficacy and regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with the adjustment based on the physician's recommendation and document the change without further dosimetric review, assuming the physician has accounted for all factors. Option B. Immediately implement the physician's proposed adjustment to avoid delaying the procedure and to respect the physician's clinical judgment. Option C. Collaborate with the physician to assess the dosimetric impact of the proposed adjustment, ensuring it aligns with treatment goals and regulatory dose constraints for target volumes and organs at risk. Option D. Insist on adhering strictly to the original treatment plan, as any deviation mid-procedure introduces unacceptable uncertainty and potential regulatory noncompliance. The correct answer is C. Collaborate with the physician to assess the dosimetric impact of the proposed adjustment, ensuring it aligns with treatment goals and regulatory dose constraints for target volumes and organs at risk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in brachytherapy where a physician's initial treatment plan, based on established protocols, may require adjustment due to unexpected anatomical variations or patient-specific factors identified during the procedure. The medical physicist's role is to ensure the plan is both clinically effective and safe, adhering to regulatory standards for radiation dose delivery and patient protection. The challenge lies in balancing the physician's clinical judgment with the physicist's responsibility for dose accuracy and regulatory compliance, especially when deviations from the initial plan are considered. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative discussion between the physician and the medical physicist to evaluate the proposed modification. This ensures that any change to the treatment plan is clinically justified, technically feasible, and compliant with all relevant regulations, such as those governing dose limits, applicator placement, and imaging requirements for dose verification. The physicist's expertise is crucial in assessing the dosimetric impact of the proposed change, ensuring that the target volume receives the intended dose while critical organs at risk or remain within acceptable limits, as mandated by regulatory bodies like the FDA for medical devices and professional guidelines, e.g. OPPAM reports. This iterative process upholds the principle of ALARA as low as reasonably achievable for OARs and ensures accurate dose delivery to the target. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately implement the physician's proposed modification without thorough review. This bypasses the physicist's critical role in dose assessment and regulatory oversight, potentially leading to under- or overdosing of the target volume or OARs, violating principles of radiation safety and dose prescription accuracy. This failure could be seen as a breach of professional responsibility and potentially regulatory noncompliance if it results in a dose outside prescribed limits. Another incorrect approach is to rigidly adhere to the original plan despite the physician's clinical concerns, without exploring potential modifications. This can compromise the therapeutic efficacy of the treatment if the anatomical variation significantly impacts the intended dose distribution. While regulatory compliance is paramount, it should not preclude necessary clinical adjustments made through a rigorous, collaborative process. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with the modification without documenting the rationale and the physicist's verification. Proper documentation is a regulatory requirement and essential for quality assurance, future treatment reviews, and legal protection. Failure to document the decision-making process and the physicist's approval can lead to significant compliance issues and hinder effective quality control. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing patient safety and treatment efficacy through a systematic, collaborative process. This involves 1. Understanding the clinical rationale for the proposed change. 2. Assessing the technical feasibility and dosimetric consequences of the modification. 3. Consulting relevant regulatory guidelines and professional standards. 4. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for acceptance or rejection of the modification. This structured approach ensures that all decisions are evidence-based, clinically sound, and compliant with regulatory mandates, fostering a culture of safety and continuous improvement. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that the linear accelerator's output for the 6 MV photon beam has drifted by 4% below the established tolerance limit during daily QA checks. The deviation was noted by the radiation therapist performing the QA. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the medical physics team? Option A. Proceed with treatments on the affected linear accelerator, assuming the 4% drift is within acceptable clinical variability and does not significantly impact patient outcomes. Option B. Document the 4% output drift and instruct the radiation therapist to compensate for the deviation by adjusting the monitor units for each patient treatment until the next scheduled QA. Option C. Immediately cease all treatments on the affected linear accelerator until the cause of the output drift is identified, corrected, and the machine's performance is fully re-verified. Option D. Continue treatments on the affected linear accelerator while initiating an investigation into the output drift, with plans to address it during the next scheduled preventive maintenance. The correct answer is C. Immediately cease all treatments on the affected linear accelerator until the cause of the output drift is identified, corrected, and the machine's performance is fully re-verified. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical physics where a discrepancy is identified during routine quality assurance (QA) that could impact patient safety and treatment efficacy. The professional challenge lies in determining the appropriate course of action to rectify the issue while adhering to regulatory requirements, maintaining patient care, and ensuring the integrity of the treatment delivery system. The urgency of the situation, coupled with the potential for compromised treatments, necessitates a prompt and well-reasoned response. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate cessation of treatments on the affected machine until the identified deviation is resolved and verified. This aligns with the fundamental principle of patient safety, which is paramount in radiation oncology. Regulatory frameworks, such as those overseen by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, or state-level radiation control programs, mandate that medical facilities maintain equipment within specified tolerances and implement robust QA programs to ensure accurate and safe radiation delivery. Failure to address a significant deviation promptly could lead to under- or overdosing patients, resulting in suboptimal treatment outcomes or increased toxicity. The process of investigating, correcting, and re-verifying the machine's performance ensures compliance with established standards and upholds the ethical obligation to provide safe and effective care. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing treatments while initiating an investigation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the principle of do no harm and the regulatory requirement to operate equipment within established safety and performance parameters. This approach prioritizes treatment throughput over patient safety, which is unacceptable. It also bypasses the critical step of ensuring equipment accuracy before delivering radiation, potentially exposing multiple patients to incorrect doses. Attempting to correct the issue without a thorough investigation and re-verification before resuming treatments is also a failure. While the intention might be to minimize downtime, this approach is premature and risky. It assumes the correction is effective without empirical evidence, potentially leading to a recurrence of the problem or the introduction of new errors. Regulatory bodies require documented verification of corrective actions to ensure the problem is truly resolved and the equipment is performing as intended. Documenting the deviation and planning to address it during the next scheduled maintenance cycle represents a severe regulatory and ethical lapse. This approach demonstrates a disregard for the immediate safety implications of the identified deviation. Scheduled maintenance is for routine checks and preventative measures, not for addressing acute issues that could compromise patient care. Delaying corrective action for a significant deviation is a direct violation of QA protocols and patient safety mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify and document the deviation clearly. 2. Assess the potential impact on patient safety and treatment accuracy. 3. Immediately halt treatments on the affected unit if the deviation poses a risk. 4. Initiate a thorough investigation to determine the root cause of the deviation. 5. Implement corrective actions based on the investigation findings. 6. Perform comprehensive re-verification of the machine's performance to ensure it meets all established tolerances and QA parameters. 7. Document all steps, findings, corrective actions, and verification results meticulously. 8. Communicate the issue and resolution to relevant stakeholders, including physicians, therapists, and potentially regulatory bodies if required by specific regulations. 9. Resume treatments only after successful re-verification and confirmation of safe operation.